your own rules say that if someone gives immigration advice, they must be a licensed representative. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
So why do you allow colleges or designated learning institutes to use unlicensed agents overseas to steer people into our system?
What would you do if your government told you to wait 50 years for an answer? Not a decision, not approval, just wait. Would you still trust the system? Would you still believe the promises made to you? And more importantly, who is this system really working for anymore? Inside the House of Commons, government officials just admitted something shocking. People invited to Canada during global crises may never be processed. Ever. So here's the question every Canadian should be asking right now. If the system is already this overwhelmed, why is it still expanding? If people already here are being pushed into decades-long limbo, who pays the price? And if a 50-year wait is considered reasonable, what else are we being asked to accept? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just about immigration. It's about trust, accountability, and the future direction of Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the team for being here today. The Minister's briefing binder showed a wait time for some humanitarian and compassionate categories of up to 50 years, and I think the website today says greater than 10 years. So this includes Hong Kongers, Ukrainians, Sudanese, and all the other people that we invited to our country. Now the government is effectively saying that they will never be processed. So, Deputy Minister, do you think it's reasonable for a newcomer to Canada to wait 50 years for their claim to be processed?
Madam Chair, so I'll start, and if you need more precision, I'll turn to my ADM colleague here. We have started to mention on our website a forward-looking processing time, which means that if you apply today, what would be the time taken to actually get that visa over time?
I understand that. So do you think it's reasonable to have somebody wait 50 years for that to be processed?
Madam Chair, I'd comment on one thing, that it is dependent on the number of spots available, which is the immigration level decision. It is not based on...
I'll take that as a yes then, that you do think it's reasonable to wait for 50 years for claims to be processed.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Point of order. We'll stop the time.
The Deputy Minister did not say that. Our colleague's an experienced colleague, but he's putting words into the mouth of the
Debate.
He can say no.
Not a point of
then allow
order.
it.
Not a point of order. Mr. Redekop, your time begins again.
Thank you, and I didn't hear a no. So I'm taking that as a yes. Now, Deputy Minister, have you advised the government to stop accepting United Nations selected government-sponsored refugees and instead use those levels to keep the promises that you made to persecuted persons from Hong Kong, Ukraine, Sudan that are already in Canada?
The 50-year wait system admitting its limits. This section explains what a 50-year processing time actually means and why it signals a deeper failure in immigration planning. When a government briefing document shows wait times of up to 50 years for humanitarian and compassionate cases, that is not a minor delay. It is a public acknowledgement that the system cannot deliver what it promised. Programs for Hong Kongers, Ukrainians, and Sudanese families were created during emergencies with clear messaging that Canada would provide safety and a path forward. But inside Parliament, officials now admit that these applications may outlive the people who filed them. For Canadians watching this debate, the concern isn't just about newcomers. It's about whether government commitments mean anything at all anymore. Key points. Canadians need to understand: 1. A 50-year wait equals an entire lifetime, not a processing backlog. 2. Families live in permanent uncertainty, unable to plan futures. 3. Children age out and lose eligibility while waiting. 4. Public trust erodes when promises quietly expire, when a simple no never comes. This section focuses on how silence and non-answers in Parliament still reveal policy reality. When asked directly whether a 50-year wait is reasonable, the Deputy Minister never said no. In the House of Commons, that matters. Officials are trained to correct false assumptions, and when they don't, it signals acceptance. By avoiding a clear rejection, the government effectively normalizes the idea that decades-long limbo is acceptable. Canadians should ask themselves, if this is considered reasonable today, What will be considered reasonable tomorrow? Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Silence in Parliament often equals policy agreement. 2. No correction means no disagreement with the premise. 3. Long waits are being treated as unavoidable, not unacceptable. 4. Accountability becomes blurred when answers are indirect. Promises versus processing spots. This section explains how immigration levels not humanitarian intent now control outcomes. Officials repeatedly point to limited spaces under the immigration levels plan. But here's the contradiction. Canada continues making commitments abroad while admitting there's no room to process people already here. That gap between promise and capacity is where trust collapses. For Canadians facing housing shortages and strained services, this raises an uncomfortable question. Is immigration being managed responsibly or politically? Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Immigration levels cap outcomes regardless of need. 2. Commitments exceed processing capacity. 3. Backlogs grow while intake continues. 4. Canadians absorb the social and economic impact.
Sure, I think, thank you for the question. I think, as was discussed earlier in the context of the broader immigration levels planning, we have to find the balance between all the various pathways and commitments that we've made, including for Hong Kong, Sudan, but also for the United Nations refugees that we do accept.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that we are going to continue to bring in people, even while we have many, many people in our country right now that are trying to go through the H and C category. We're still going to keep on bringing people in. That's what I'm hearing you say?
Madam Chair, that is not how we actually proceed. What we do is we do not have any cap, or we don't have an intake control over asylum. This is one category where people are actually coming in, and that
Madam Chair,
cannot stop.
Sorry to interrupt, but these were specific programs. These aren't general asylum claims. These were the Hong Kong programs. These are the Ukraine programs. These were specific programs with known numbers.
And Madam Chair, that is what we are trying to do, that those numbers which were created so far, example, Ukraine was a temporary program, and if you are turning to be into a permanent residence, you have to apply through the levels of economic, and it'll take you that many years because there's a limited space in the levels plan.
Thank you.
The illusion of balance. This section examines how balance is used to justify continued intake despite existing backlogs. Government officials repeatedly reference balance, balancing pathways, commitments, and obligations. On paper, it sounds responsible, but in practice, balance has meant continuing to bring people in while thousands already inside Canada wait years or decades. Canadians deserve to know, if balance exists, why does the backlog keep growing? Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Balance does not reduce backlog. It redistributes pressure. 2. Existing applicants are deprioritized without explanation. 3. New commitments dilute existing promises. 4. Communities feel the strain first. No caps, no breaks. This section highlights the admission that certain immigration streams cannot be controlled. One of the most revealing admissions in this debate is that some categories have no intake limits. That means there is no mechanism to pause, slow down, or reassess when systems are overwhelmed. When intake is unlimited but processing is capped, delays are guaranteed, and Canadians pay the cost. Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. No intake control leads to inevitable backlogs. 2. Processing capacity remains fixed. 3. Policy lacks emergency safeguards. 4. Long-term planning becomes impossible. Temporary programs, permanent pressure. This section explains how temporary pathways still compete for permanent residency spots. Programs like Ukraine were presented as temporary solutions, but once individuals seek permanent residence, they enter capped immigration streams. This creates competition between economic immigrants and humanitarian cases. turning temporary compassion into permanent congestion. Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Temporary status often leads to permanent applications. 2. Economic streams absorb humanitarian overflow. 3. Wait times stretch across categories. 4. Canadians are rarely told this upfront.
Thank you. Would it be possible to table with the committee in the H&C category, by each stream in there, how many files have been processed by quarter for the last 2 years, 2024 and 2025? That would be very helpful to us. Is that something you can provide?
1 minute.
Can I be very precise? You're looking for last 2 years' data for the 24-25?
The last 2 years. Calendar 24.
We will provide
25.
that, Madam Chair. We will provide that.
Your own rules say that if someone gives immigration advice, they must be a licensed representative. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
So why do you allow colleges or designated learning institutes to use unlicensed agents overseas to steer people into our system?
Madam Chair, our ability to actually do that overseas is we don't have any authority over the overseas. We only have the authority in Canada, which actually binds that only the registered consultant give the advice. What happens outside of Canada is not something which we can.
Do we not have control over the designated learning institutes in Canada? Can we not tell them how to do things?
We absolutely do, Madam Chair. We actually give them very clear guidance as to what does it mean if there is a fraud detected, what happens as a consequence, and what does it mean. But again, as I mentioned, we don't have a control outside of Canada.
Mr. Kuchar, thank you, Mr. Redekop.
Temporary programs, permanent pressure. This section focuses on the government's reluctance to provide clear processing data. When an MP asks for 2 years of processing data by quarter, that should be routine. Instead, the information is promised for later. Without timely data, Parliament cannot assess performance and Canadians cannot judge whether the system is improving or collapsing. Key points. Canadian need to understand. When data delays weaken accountability. 2. Oversight depends on timely information. 3. Canadians are asked to trust without evidence. 4. Policy debates become speculation. Licensed in Canada, unchecked abroad. This section exposes the overseas loophole in immigration advice. Canada requires licensed representatives to provide immigration advice, but only within Canada. Overseas, unlicensed agents can freely influence applicants, often steering them into programs under false promises. When things go wrong, the consequences land on Canadian institutions and communities. Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Overseas agents operate with minimal oversight. 2. Misrepresentation undermines system integrity. 3. International students face exploitation. 4. Consequences surface inside Canada. Control without enforcement. This section explains the contradiction between guidance and actual authority. Officials claim they provide guidance to designated learning institutions, yet admit they cannot fully control overseas behavior. If institutions benefit financially from recruitment, Canadians have a right to ask why accountability doesn't follow the money. Key points. Canadian need to understand. 1. Institutions benefit while oversight remains limited. 2. Guidance lacks enforcement power. 3. Fraud detection comes after damage is done. 4. Canadians deal with the fallout. This House of Commons debate doesn't just reveal policy disagreements. It exposes a system strained to its core. When government promises turn into 50-year waits, when answers are dodged instead of given, and when transparency is delayed, the consequences don't stay in Ottawa. They land in Canadian communities. They affect housing, healthcare, jobs, wages, and the very trust people have in public institutions. This is not just an immigration issue. It's a governance issue that touches Canadian citizens, temporary foreign workers, international students, and families caught in limbo. If we can't have honest conversations about capacity, accountability, and enforcement, then everyone pays the price. If you believe Canadians deserve facts over spin and answers over silence, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this video, and add your voice in the comments. Because the future of Canada is being decided right now, and staying informed is no longer optional.